Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get this committee meeting started. Hope everybody's doing well, had a good weekend. Welcome to our third structure. It's good to see everybody. Today is March 18th, Monday morning. Let the record reflect that we are joined by my colleagues, Vice Chair Sherry Leitner, Scott Sherman, and Marty Emerald. And I'd like to thank members of the public who are in our audience today, as well as those who are watching on City TV. I really never get tired of repeating this, that this committee is really all about the public and working together to rebuild San Diego. We are also joined by our city attorney representative, Ryan Kohut, and our IBA representative, Aaron Noel, as well as Francisco Estrada from the mayor's office, and Almas Udris, our committee consultant. Now, we've assigned ourselves so much homework, as well as the IBA, during our first two committee meetings, that our agenda today is a bit lighter. We get to see some of the results of that. We do have our first homework assignment completed by the IBA, which we're all looking forward to hearing later on in this agenda. And if you've had a chance to read it already, I think you'll agree that it's a very, very excellent report, again, that the IBA has brought us that's going to help us move forward on the work plan. Item 6, we're going to be talking about technology, which I'm very interested in personally. And again, that's opportunities for us to engage the community, which I'm looking forward to as well. In the spirit of Sunshine Week, which was last week, we'll be concluding our committee with that discussion and seeing what we can do to move the city towards even greater transparency and providing citizens with opportunities to engage their city leaders when it comes to infrastructure needs and priorities. So first, we're going to start off with non-agenda public comment. We have one speaker, Ms. Catherine Rhodes. Catherine, come forward. You've got 3 minutes, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Catherine Rhodes from Point Loma, and I wanted to give you guys great news. Mayor Filner went to the homeless tent, on Saturday morning and said that he's going to be fully funding the emergency shelters until we don't need the emergency shelters anymore. So the homeless do not have to, after 3 months, they don't have to have the shelter closed down. One of the other things is the city is, Council President Gloria specifically asked the city attorney's office for a legal opinion on the on CEQA issues and different legal issues as it relates to temporary emergency shelter, and so far we haven't received it. And what I've been saying for a while is San Diego's in violation of the Fair Housing and Hearth Act, because they think that you need a conditional use permit for homeless emergency shelters and transitional shelters in areas located in Figure 1 and Figure 2 of the housing element of our general plan. And then I actually have a little bit right here for the housing element of our general plan that you guys looked at the other day. And, you know, it was really hard to kind of see, but just tell you a little of it. To meet affordable housing goals, we were supposed to have 27,380 very low, moderate units to be built. Instead, 4,492 units were permitted. So only 16% of the goal was actually achieved. You know, we always think that we had that 20% affordable housing, but a lot of what the redevelopment Civic San Diego did is they would count the same units the next year within different project areas. So this housing element is great. Now we finally got the numbers. I've been waiting for this for a long time. And then I also wanted to tell you that I'm an owner of my state tidelands, and so are you. And in fact, everybody here in San Diego, in the state of California, are landowners of the state tidelands through our state tidelands trust. And when you guys did the Convention Center Facilities District, you did not allow me to vote in that election, and I'm a property owner. So I have a call into the State Lands Commission so that they could stop the city council from usurping the authority of the state by pretending that you guys can say lessees or owners of public lands. You could do that for the, let's say, the lodge at Torrey Pines, but you cannot do that for any of the hotels that are in Mission Bay or in San Diego Bay. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Our next item is community input on infrastructure needs and priorities. We have no public speakers on that item, so we'll move on to committee comment. Do any of my colleagues have any comment this morning? Seeing none, we'll move on to city attorney, IBA, and mayoral staff comment. Anything? Nothing. Okay, moving right along. We'll move to our adoption agenda. Move to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, February 25th, 2013. And those will stand approved as distributed unless there are any objections. And seeing none, those will be approved. Consent items, we don't have any today, so we'll move on to our action items. Item 1, report from the Development Services Department regarding the Mission Valley Public Facilities Financing Plan update for fiscal year 13. And before I hand it over to DSD staff, Mr. Tomlinson, I want to make a couple of introductory comments. For the benefit of the public, a public facilities financing plan identifies infrastructure projects in a particular community that will be needed as a result of development. They can include libraries, fire stations, street improvements, parkland acquisition, flood control, anything that staff and the community identifies being impacted by new development. Once that plan is approved by the City Council, the fees calculated in the plan are charged on new development that occurs within that community. As more people move into our region and contribute to our economic development, PFFPs help our neighborhoods maintain their quality of life. They are a funding source, but they are not the funding source for infrastructure. They provide the portion of funding attributable to new development only for things like building a new fire station. Some of the need for a new fire station could be attributed to development in that community, but there are other factors that can contribute to the need for a new fire station, including population growth in other communities, as well as citywide need. Because these financing plans provide one source of funding for infrastructure, the 5-year plan that we will produce later this year needs to account for them, and we need to ensure that they consistently reflect the public's needs and confirm our understanding of them. Hopefully I didn't give too much of a preview of your presentation. How much do you guys think you need here?
I would say that was very well said, Councilmember Percy. I have nothing to add. My name is Tom Tomlinson, Deputy Director of Development Services. With me today is John Tricana, Supervising Management Analyst in Facilities Financing, and Oscar Galvez, Project Manager in Facilities Financing. Oscar will be giving us the presentation today, and I think it'll be 1 to 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning. I'm Oscar Galvez with the Facilities Financing section of the Development Services Department. Before you today is the Mission Valley Public Facilities Financing Plan update. The current financing plan is from FY 2006 and includes the community's boundary and area of benefit from which development impact fees are collected, projected community build-out, and identifies public facility needs. As part of this update, the estimated cost and project scopes for public facilities were revised. Anticipated residential and non-residential development were updated to reflect the current growth forecast in 2030. And as a result of the Quarry Falls or Savita and Hazard Center redevelopment approvals, a new 17-acre public park site within Savita and a 0.63-acre public park site within Hazard were added. As a result, the current DIF decreased from 12,233 to 11,315 per dwelling unit due to increases in anticipated residential development, while costs decreased slightly. A comprehensive review of the community serving infrastructure will be conducted as part of the community plan update, which is scheduled to begin in FY 2014, contingent on funding. And any changes will be incorporated in a subsequent financing plan update that will be a companion document to the community plan update. This concludes the staff report. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. We do have one public speaker on this item, Ms. Catherine Rhodes. And again, you have 3 minutes.
Lovely. Catherine Rhodes from Point Loma. And I just kind of wanted to talk about the Melrose, or the Facilities District, I guess that's what it is. Usually when they're used in the state, what happens is a developer wants to put this Melrose onto the land, and there was usually just one developer, one property owner. They get to make they're the voters. They voted in. And so what happens afterwards is when it gets subdivided and individual owners now are part of this facilities district, it's never really owners of the house have ever voted for this facility district. It's always a developer that puts the Melrose issue on. And so, again, what you guys are doing I'm just relating this to the Convention Center Facilities District, is a Melrose just like that. And so, you could do it legally really easily, which you guys do, but you cannot use the same thing for the Convention Center Facilities District. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. I will just point out this is not really a Melrose item, but we do appreciate your comments. We'll go to committee questions. Ms. Emerald.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Many of these FPPCs haven't been updated in a very long time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I know in the Mid-City we're going to begin some public hearings on adjusting our fees throughout the Mid-City area that haven't been adjusted in 20 years or some such thing. And again, how long they're in Mission Valley?
I'm sorry, how long?
How long since they've been adjusted in Mission Valley again?
Oh, the last plan was updated in 2006.
Okay. But things are moving very quickly in Mission Valley with higher density and so forth. Is that correct?
Since the last update, since 2008, there have been two large discretionary projects. One was Hazard Center, the other was Quarry Falls, which is now called Savita. And I believe there are plans for additional development in Mission Valley.
Right. And Hazard Center has not yet, that construction has not yet begun.
Not to my knowledge.
But
no.
it was approved a year or two ago.
Correct.
Yeah, I gotcha. Now, I'm sorry, give me your name one more time.
Oscar
Oscar. What's your last name again?
Galvez.
Galvez. Thank you. You were saying that the updating will begin as cost allows, or I know that's not your exact terminology, but are you looking for money to do your study going forward?
No, we've completed the financing plan, and we're here today to ask this committee to recommend approval of it.
Okay, and that's what's going, the fee that's going down slightly.
That's correct.
Because it's you're guesstimating the costs going forward for development or mitigation and so forth based upon what's been approved in the Mission Valley area.
I'll let Tom answer that question.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
What will be, what you'll see is when the community plan gets updated and there's a thorough review of the infrastructure in Mission Valley and a revisit of the population, land development, land use codes, land use plan, at that point you will see a holistic review of all the infrastructure that's needed in that community. And our
Gotcha.
plan will be updated to reflect that updated community plan.
Now, will the city have to come up with some dollars to help mitigate the gas plumes under Qualcomm now? I know there have been some court cases involved with that, but that seems like it's going to be a huge expense going forward. And would, and I'm not asking you to come up with any hard and fast today, but as you go forward and you look at future needs, are you going to be looking at that in terms of cleaning up that mess there and keeping the gas out of the river?
I would say probably not, because that's not a piece of community-serving infrastructure. We typically limit our eligible facilities to streets, libraries, parks, and what am I missing? Fire stations.
Yeah, well, that fire station.
And police station. Thank you.
I do have concerns about that because it's appearing that San Diego is going to have to pick up a bigger share of that tab going forward, and that is a huge issue in Mission Valley. Mm-hmm. And if it's not covered by the PFFP, then how do we generate the money to start doing what we can to protect the environment and make that Qualcomm site something that is down the road one that can be developed into something other than a parking lot and a stadium? So I know that is going to be an issue going forward. Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas at all? Is there any discussion about that?
That is an excellent question. In our little group here, we have not begun to think about that issue.
Oh, well, I hope that you will, because I mean that's one that isn't really just in the future. It's happening now, and at some point we really have to make a decision, I think, to find financing so that we can protect the environment, especially the aquifer and everything there. But thank you for your work on this. It's not often that we say that fees are going down. Even if it's just ever so slightly, but still, there's a little break for now. Mm-hmm. But don't go spending it all in one place. Right? I'd be happy to move the item.
Thank you, Ms. Emerald. Mr. Sherman.
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of what we're doing here, and I know the community plan updates are coming up for that area very, very soon. Yeah, well overdue. Are we going to be using the PFFPs that we may or may not be approving here today? Are we going to use that in the community plan, or if that community plan's 2 years down the road, are you going to need to redo the PFFP on that?
What we'll do is, assuming this gets approved or recommended for approval today and gets approved at council, this PFFP update that's before you today would go into effect 60 days after the mayor signs the resolution. That would stay in effect until the community plan gets updated. We would then update our financing plan as a companion document to the community plan. And both documents would go forward through the same public hearing process at the same time.
Okay, because I just want to make sure we're not, duplicating work and duplicating effort and that kind of thing.
This was a good iterative step for us, too. This is not lost work.
Okay, okay. Perfect. That's what I needed to know to get that done. And then on the Qualcomm site, which is a big interest to me too, it's my understanding that the Kinder Morgan's almost finished the cleanup on that site, and the standards have almost already been met that the Regional Quality Control Board has set forth. I know there are discussions about water tables coming up and those type of things and doing some additional testing, but I'll have to look into it some more because from what my understanding is they're pretty close to being right on the recommendations from the Regional Water Control Board. So be more than happy to take a look at it. We can work on that one together. But it's I'm hoping it gets cleaned up because that is a very important site to District 7. I mean, everywhere I go, it's either develop it into a park or build a new stadium. So everybody wants to do something with it, but we got to make sure that that's taken care of first. But it sounds like there's some good steps being made in that direction. We need a motion to approve this? You already, and we had a second? Perfect. That's what happens when you're doing text messages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Ms. Leitner.
Is the facilities financing plan the only financing mechanism which is used in this community plan area, or are there CFDs here as well with Melrose?
I would imagine that the individual developers over their developments have probably used CFDs to finance their particular infrastructure needs. In terms of a community-wide CFD or Melrose, I'm not aware of any.
No, I wouldn't think so. Great. I sincerely hope the community plan does get updated post haste.
Thank you to my colleagues. One question, as I was looking through, well, as you guys know, a week ago, the City Council approved $3.7 million to fully fund new Fire Station 45 in East Mission Valley, which is going to be a very good thing to get those guys out of the trailers at the stadium right now. I know that I see Chief Maynor in the audience, and I know that he's eagerly awaiting the construction of that, as are all of us. But what my question is that the PFFP before us today says that there is another fire station needed for the west side of Mission Valley. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the Citygate report, which unfortunately I didn't bring a copy down or upstairs with me, but I don't recall seeing that in there. I see an FRS, a fast response squad listed, but Ms. Emerald, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but is there another fire station called for in Citygate for Mission Valley?
It was not identified as a priority. The fire stations that were listed in the Citygate report were considered priorities based upon changing needs and traffic patterns and so forth. And I think that Chief Maynard could speak more to why the specific stations and areas were called out in the report.
Great. Chief Maynor, good morning.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you. And again, thank you for your support of the East Mission Valley Fire Station. Putting the GAP funding in the most recent bond offering is a very good thing for us. We're looking forward to moving those firefighters out and improving our response times as well. Just in terms of context, the Citygate study was done in 2011. It looked at the fire department's ability to meet council-established response times throughout the city. The consultant determined that we were not able to do so primarily because 19 gaps in our coverage plan existed within the city. 10 of those gaps he identified were large enough to justify the building of a traditional fire station, full 4-person crew. He identified 9 others that were kind of in the seams of the coverage plan that he felt might qualify for something he termed as an experimental program, the Fast Response Squad program. Essentially, it is a smaller fire vehicle, more like a pickup truck, a 2-person crew rather than a 4-person crew. Really functions to do some initial, very light firefighting, handle some medical calls, serve as a recon resource to see how many additional resources might be needed. Now, the challenge of that concept is that and the consultant noted it's not something that's well established in the fire service. So he recommended a pilot program be conducted here in the city to see if that would actually work for the city. Now, we were tasked with putting together a work group to establish a pilot program. We have all the policies and protocols in place. What we do not have is the funding necessary to conduct the pilot program. And therein kind of lies the challenge. We have an untested concept that may be able to help us in 9 of these 19 gap areas. But if that concept proves unworkable, we still have the need to somehow provide coverage in those areas. That would require the building of a traditional fire station at greater expense, a 4-person crew. So the issue is really kind of a policy call and maybe an efficiency and legal call at this point. How do you ensure that the funding is there for that eventuality and not underfund, not do anything at all in those areas, and really kind of relive some of the mistakes we've made in the past in our community with development. I think that we need to find a way to ensure the money is there. If that lower cost option truly exists and is workable, and I believe it will be, then that's great. We'll plug that in. We'll certainly save everyone a lot of money. But in the interim, we have to have some contingency to cover that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's
Thank
a
you.
very good explanation. Appreciate that, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's Ms. Imran.
Just based upon the chief's remarks, does this, the community plan update, will you include, or would you include, please, this concept of the fast response teams and what kind of funding would be needed for those, so that going forward in this very high density area, we have a sense of how many of these kinds of fast responses we would need, perhaps, what it would cost to get a pilot program going in the valley. And I don't know that I necessarily would want to wait until the community plan update is done, but I think that ought to be a priority, just to give us an idea of how much money we need to set aside and invest in this. And may I add that to the motion, that you folks will go back and start looking at that quickly and come back with a report?
Sure. Facilities financing or the appropriate staff will do that.
I do appreciate it.
Okay, is that okay with you? Or who seconded? You seconded, didn't you? You did? Would one of you like to second? Okay, perfect. Yes, Ms. Lightning.
Does the facilities financing plan take care of the stormwater system as well?
Typically, what we use is our barometer if it's an eligible facility or not, if it is in the community plan, whether explicitly or implicitly through policy. So if the community plan talks about the need for stormwater, which in Mission Valley would think
Yes, one would think it would be prime
then
consideration.
we could consider that an eligible facility and put it in our financing plan as well.
Okay. I sincerely hope that the community plan continues with advocating for stormwater management.
Yes.
Ms. Emerald, would you be amenable to referring the second part of your motion to the Public Safety Committee? Since it's more dealing with the, it sounded like you wanted to know the cost of getting the...
Yeah, I'm happy to include that in our next, as I make promises, our consultant is smiling here. But I want to make sure that fast response is also part of the community plan. I would think that we want to basically codify it, make it a formal part of the community plan. Chief, you've got some thoughts.
Well, I was hoping I could provide some clarity, and please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is a reduced cost basis has been established for a fast response concept in this particular facilities financing plan for West Mission Valley, or for Mission Valley. The challenge becomes then, since it's a reduced cost, roughly half of the cost of a full fire station, what happens if that concept does not work out? What do we do then? And that's the challenge that we have. So presently it's sitting at essentially a half-value fire station. I'm not sure that's the best approach.
Okay. Well, as opposed to full value fire station.
If the concept doesn't work out, we will then essentially have half the money we would need to build a fire station in an area that needs a fire station.
Okay, I gotcha. But on the other hand, if we don't get a pilot project going here pretty soon, we won't know if this is even an option.
We've costed out the price of a pilot program. The direction of PSNS last time was for us to pursue this through corporate sponsorship. We will be working with Ms. Kalura to try and identify a sponsor for that pilot program.
Okay, but maybe we can get your folks to PSNS coming up, and you can give us a breakout of all the figures. I just want to make sure that we have fire safety and some kind of response built into community plans citywide. And I would imagine by the time these community plans get done, we have to go revisit City Gate and probably add more sites to it because of the growth and change in traffic patterns and density and all that.
That was the consultant's recommendation. It would be mine as well that from time to time we need to go back and look, and not only determine if there are additional needs, but whether the monies have been spent have essentially provided the benefit they were anticipated to provide.
Okay, thank you very much. But yeah, I'm happy to add that piece, but I think that going forward with these community plans, we've got to be holistic, and it's not just about streets and sewers and buildings. It's about the public safety infrastructure, too. what are our needs going forward, and where do we need to make those investments. And if that means that it changes the fees, so be it. But we've got to figure out a reliable, ongoing source of funding and have public safety built into our community plans. This is so essential. Thank you.
So your motion, just to restate here, would be to move the item to refer the costing of the FRS units to PSNNS, and then direct staff and future community plan updates to include the cost of public safety items in their community plan updates.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Except community plans do include public safety facilities. It's identifying them. And then the PFFP, which comes from the community plan, would include that cost already. It's just maybe there should be something where you, since we're looking at this rapid response idea, maybe you have two separate choices there where we have the fees
Full
until...
on or...
Right.
But I don't see the money actually being available. I mean, that's part of the problem. These community plan updates
DIF funds, developer impact fee funds, take a long, long time to accumulate. That's why I asked about the community financing district, and I'm really curious as how the overlays work, and if the folks that do have Mello-Roos, do they actually participate in the developer impact fee collection as well, or are they just completely separate and aren't paying into the facilities?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Can I answer that? So we have the saying in facilities financing, which is you don't pay twice. So if through a CFD you are financing community serving infrastructure that is in our public facilities financing plan, we will remove that portion of the fee to those homeowners or that developer. If your CFD is financing schools or project roads that are not community serving or other facilities, they will pay the development impact fee.
So typically the CFDs expire after a certain length of time. Do you then go back and put the PFFP charge on those as they redevelop within that area?
We give credits for existing improvements, so if they built their improvements with that CFD, they then tore them down and replaced those same improvements, they would get a credit against those existing improvements and probably would not pay a development impact fee. If they were to intensify their use or add additional improvements, yes, they would then pay that incremental increase.
Good. All right. So we have a motion on the floor by Ms. Emerald to move the item to refer the costing of the fire department's fast response squads to PSNNS committee, as well as include the FRS cost estimates in future community plan updates. Does that sound right? Okay. Ms. Leitner.
And or public safety generally, but inclusive of the fast response stations, maybe police facilities, but yeah.
I would like, with the direction to PS and Public Safety and Neighborhood Services, to also request that we move forward on a pilot program of some sort to actually check this out, so that maybe by the time the plan is updated, we know one way or the other which we'd like to see in the plan.
Absolutely.
That is an excellent suggestion.
You got it.
You'll accept that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Excellent. Well, we have a good motion on the floor. We have a second by Mr. Sherman. Was that right? Okay. All right, good. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? There are none. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And staff, would it be possible, there's a lot of good information in these PFFPs. Is it possible that you could return to this committee sometime in the future and just kind of give us an overview of citywide PFFPs and how they operate and what good, valuable information is in them?
Sure, we can give you a DIF 101.
That'd be perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on to item 2. We have a report from the Public Works Department regarding as-needed environmental planning services consultant agreement with Recon Environmental. And I see Mr. Nagelwort, good morning, here from Public Works to walk us through. Looks like we have items 2 and 3, which are pretty similar, very related. Would it be possible to take them, in terms of your presentation, take them at the same time?
That was going to be my opening question. So
excellent.
We will support.
We're on the same page.
Yes, thank you.
Love it.
Well,
how much time do you think you need?
5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Combined. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, fellow council members. My name is James, as you heard. My name is James Negelvort. I'm the Assistant Director for Public Works, also your city engineer. Sitting to my right is, I have two Carries, so I can't get this wrong. Sitting to my right is Carrie, sitting to my left is Carrie. Carrie Santoro, sitting to my right is our Public Information, I'm sorry, PO, Project Officer 2. Project Officer 2. She heads up our environmental section for our department. And then sitting to my left is Carrie Purcell. She's a senior environmental planner in our group, and she's actually leading these two consultant contracts in that. Our reason for being here is to seek your approval to be able to move these two items to the full council for their consideration and approval of two consultant contracts. And I'm going to ask Carrie to walk you through the details of each of those contracts. And then afterwards, I'd like to spend about 1 to 2 minutes just explaining to you how consultant contracts fit into our business model on how we deliver the CIP. So with that, Carrie.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Purcell. My name is Carrie Purcell with Public Works. And I'm just going to go over items 2 and 3, the details of those. So with regard to item 2, that's the as-needed environmental consulting agreement with Recon Environmental. And item 3 is with DUDEC, environmental planning. And basically the action for both of these is to authorize the mayor to execute an agreement in an amount not to exceed $4 million for these as-needed services. And the other action would be to authorize the expenditure of $1,000 from WBS 00856, which is El Camino Real Road Bridge Widening Project. The scope for the contracts are for them to provide various environmental technical studies and qualified monitoring services which are needed for various local, state, and federal environmental and permitting requirements. So these consultants provide the technical studies and the support needed for those. The duration of the agreement, both agreements would be for 3 years with an option to extend for an additional 2 years. And the commitment, the city is agreeing to fund a minimum task of $1,000. So that's basically the upfront commitment. And for DUDEC, DUDEC and Recon basically would have the same terms. So that's it.
I told you it's going to take less than 5 minutes. Just in closing, in that we employ quite a few consultants in our business. Our business model involves, in the execution of the capital improvement program, both public city staff. We have some in-house design capability, but we also need the services and employ a lot of consultant services. Some of those services, and what you should get used to, I think, seeing, because we'll be coming to this committee, services for traffic and transportation engineering services, mechanical engineering services, general civil, structural engineering, architectural services. We have some fire stations we talked about, landscape architectural services for our parks, environmental services as we have for you today, geotech services, community public relations services, a whole list of services that we employ. So the way I like to phrase it is that, to deliver the city's capital improvement program, it's actually a partnership of consultants and city staff in a business model to be able to execute those projects. Now, we employ consultants for two primary reasons. One, like these two consultant contracts, when we have specialty skills that the department doesn't have, those ability, that talent within the department. We do not have paleontologists. Say that word for me.
Paleontologist.
See, I can't even say it. We do not have archaeologists and things like that are necessary in the department. So often we're hiring consultants. Sometimes we are the lead on the project. We are providing the in-house design and the project management, but we'll still need as-needed consultant services for those unique little areas that the project demands. We also hire consultants to augment our workforce. And the reason we do that is because, as you guys have seen, the demand on the production demand in the CIP has peaks and valleys. And it does not make sense, or we get ourselves in trouble if we try to staff for the peak. We'll find the following year we need to be cost recoverable. We'll find the following year that we're in trouble. So one unique feature, and what Carrie talked about, is that these consultant contracts, the commitment that the city's signing up to is only $1,000. Why? That lets us let them go. If for some reason, God forbid, something happens to the CIP budget, the CIP program, and it did happen back in 2004 where we fell out of the bond market, it allows us to be able to start making immediate cuts, at least on the consultant side, to bring our costs down, our production down. So that's how we fit it in there and fit it into our model in that. What I'll close with you is that, just to give you a feel for how much business we put out for consultants, Last year's CIP expenditures were over $360 million. That included city staff, contractors, consultants. Contractors make up about $40 million of that we had put out in terms of contracts and invoices and payment for that. Anyways, that concludes the staff's presentation. We'd love to answer your questions.
Thank you all very much. We don't have any public speakers on this item. Do we have any questions or comments from committee? Seeing none.
Just to move the item, I guess.
Okay, good. We have a motion by Ms. Emerald. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Sherman. Thank you very much for this presentation. I just have one question because you answered all the other ones I had. How do you select the consultants? Do you have kind of a list that you put together over the years, and then when you have work that comes up, you're able to pull them off of that list, or do you have to put it out for bid, as things come up?
We hire. There's two ways we hire consultants. One is we hire them at the project level. So we may have a very special project. We may choose to deliver it by design build or something like that, and go out and hire the consultant contractor. And that's when we're coming forward at the project level and hiring that consultant for project A. But the other thing that we do, because it saves time, it creates flexibility, our ability to deliver the CIP, is that we hire an example of what you have the two consultant contracts here, which are called as-needed consultant services, which we hire them for a duration, we hire them for a certain amount, not to exceed, and then we put them together. Our experience has been, and we've got just a little bit more information, we've got about 25 active as-needed consultant contracts right now. Some are reaching the end of their term. Some are, as we have today, we're trying to get them on board. Our experience has been in delivering the CIP that we know that we need these skill sets and this talent to be able to have on board, to be able to pull as projects, get approved by City Council, to be able to be flexible and move them forward. And so one is that just trying to predict the future and identifying the needs. And then the second is there might be a specific project where we're going to go out directly after that project. And I think your question is the process and how we go about it. The process, how you do it, is that for as-needed consultant contracts, we'll be contacting contract purchasing department and getting the solicitation of all the consultants that have signed up. Either they're going to go to an ongoing pool that is maintained, or in an example of this, we go out and we advertise. And I think we advertised in
February of last year.
Yeah, and they advertised in the San Diego Daily Transcript, San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, La Pressa, and the Asian Journal, and also the city's website. So we go out through a typical RFP, go out and do the advertisement. Certain group will apply. In this example of this, the two contracts we have had here, I think we had 10 that applied. We go through a short list. We didn't interview all 10. Short list them down to 6. And then after that, they come in, they go, and they go through an interview process. Staff evaluates them, scores them. There is a ranking, and there is a point system in that's provided to rank them. After that, we select. We made our selection of the two based upon the qualifications. And then once we have that in place, then they'll be available. Once they're in place on an as-needed, we then typically use them through a rotation process. We're not competing them against each other. So staff comes in with their project. They have a need for archaeological services on that. We're looking at the next consultant that's available on that. We go through the rotation process on that. Okay. And I can tell you more.
Well, that's very good information. Thank you, Mr. Nagelbort. Ms. Leitner, you have a question?
I had a question. Both the firms have underrepresentations for their equal opportunity plan and have been directed to create a plan. Both of those were created in, I guess it was August and June of 2011, so that if they're still indicating underrepresentation, does that mean there will be a revised EO plan created?
Well, I can't totally speak for EOCP because they're not here, but they were on the panel and evaluated them. So I assume they would, but I don't.
Wait,
sure.
Are we talking about the workforce report or their sub-consulting targets and goals?
No, it's actually the equal employment opportunity compliance, okay, and that it is required, and that they have both shown underrepresentation. The one, DUDEC, I think it is, DUDEC shows more underrepresentation than does Recon. And so they both had submitted plans that they were going to work on this in 2011. Now we're reissuing contracts to them. And will they be reissuing another EO plan?
Again, I can't speak specifically for EOC. I don't know, but what I do know that is on the subcontracting side that they have responsibility of 20% of these services need to go to certified SLB, ELB firms, and they've listed what those firms are and going forward. On the workforce report of their own workforce, I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know the details.
Okay, I'd appreciate.
Any more questions or comments from my colleagues? Okay. I'm being advised by the city attorney that we should actually do separate votes since we have two items here on items 2 and 3. So we'll go ahead and we have a motion for item 2 by Ms. Emerald to move that item and a second by Mr. Sherman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And seeing none opposed, it passes unanimously. Item 3, do we have a motion? All righty, thank you very much. Item 3, we have a motion by Ms. Emerald, seconded by Mr. Sherman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously as well. Thank you, James and Carrie and Carrie. Item 4, moving right along, we have a report from the Development Services Department regarding the fiscal year 14 Annual Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program Development Impact Fee Adjustment. And it took me so long to say that, you guys have already sat down. So, Mr. Tomlinson, good to see you again. It's been literally minutes since you were up here. How much time will you need?
Good morning, Tom Tomlinson, Deputy Director, Development Services Department. I think we'll need 1 to 2 minutes if that's a fairly short report. With me today is Megan Sheffield, Senior Management Analyst with Facilities Financing, and Scott Mercer, Supervising Management Analyst, also with Facilities Financing.
Good morning. Good morning. The item before you is required annual increase to the Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program, or RTCIP, Development Impact Fee Schedule. The RTCIP program is an element of the Transnet Extension Ordinance, which requires that all jurisdictions receiving Transnet funds collect an exaction from the private sector from each new non-exempt resident in the jurisdiction. The RTCIP requires that the city take specific administrative actions each year to ensure that the city is in compliance with the Transnet Ordinance. Specifically, Section 9 of the Transnet Extension Ordinance requires that the RTCIP exaction be increased annually by no less than 2% per year. On February 22nd of this year, the Sandag Board of Directors approved the minimum 2% increase for all 18 cities and the County of San Diego. In FY 2012, the city collected approximately $2.4 million in direct RTCIP fees. Currently, expenditures from the RTCIP fund include appropriations towards the improvements at 163 and Friars Road and the Euclid and 94 interchange. And that concludes our report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. We do have one public speaker on this item, Ms. Catherine Rhodes. Please come forward. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, she's a civil engineer.
Hello, Catherine Rhodes from Point Loma. And I wanted to talk about the Sandag and the ordinance. If you put the issue to a public vote, then you could get rid of Sandag's things that you can't use the Transnet money for anything you want to. You could, your infrastructure, everything that you want to do, you could actually finance with the Transnet funds if you put it to a public vote, because what Sandag's trying to do is saying, in 2004 we voted a specific way, to put a lot of the freeways in North County, pretty much, and so San Diego's been, not getting what we need, but Sandag is our metropolitan planning organization that's required by the federal and state government, and that includes community plan updates. It includes any infrastructure you want. So what I think that you guys should do, since we have to have a District 4 election, we'll probably have a runoff, to put a full citywide thing onto the ballot. So you write it exactly what you want us to do and say, for your Sandag money that comes in, instead of, I guess instead of freeways, you want infrastructure first or transit first. And so there's a solution for you guys, but you guys have to actually act and put it onto the ballot. And then, the other thing, you guys were talking about Mission Valley and the Qualcomm Stadium site. Just to remind you, it's actually 2 sites. One site's owned by the Water Department that, of course, one day we want to make into a parkland. And then the other one's actually owned by the City of San Diego General Fund. So when it gets developed, half of it has to be, parkland. So you can't develop the whole entire site in the future. But you have, and then of course we won't ever have money to do that because of the because you didn't allow us to vote to increase hotel taxes. So if you have allow us to increase hotel taxes, you could specifically say, I want to increase hotel taxes for infrastructure. Done. And you could, so you have two different things to pay for everything you want through. One through a public vote talking about Sandag or what you want, and the other one through a tax increase for hotels. And I really think that you should do it when we have our next special election. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll move on to committee questions and comments. Mr. Sherman.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know that this is required by ordinance, and I'd be making a motion if need be to move this on and vote in the affirmative. But it says that it's required a 2% or minimum increase every year. Is there a term limit, time limit, for lack of better words, on when that goes? Does it just go 2% every year? Is it just while the ordinance is in place, or where does it end?
Probably ends with the Transnet tax itself, which is 40 years.
All right. Ms. Zimmerman.
And I'm happy to second the motion. You say that the 2% will account for about $2.4 million this coming year?
Actually, we collected $2.4 million last year.
Last year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea what it will be? Are you projecting anything going forward?
I think that probably this year development is coming along about the same as it did last year. The year before last, we collected $1.2 million. We had residential development pretty much double in FY12. I don't know if that's going to continue to increase, but if it stays the same, we'll probably collect another 2.4 this year.
And what happens to the money?
It goes into an RTCIP fund, and then through the SIPRAC and the CIP prioritization, the CIPs are approved, and they can tap into the RTCIP. It's for regional transportation projects on roads that are identified by Sandag as the regional arterial. So as long as it's on a regional arterial and there's a CIP, they can tap into these funds to use those for those projects.
Could you give us some, for instances, where the money is being spent currently?
For instance, this year appropriated to the 163 in Friars Road to widen the bridge. Also, there was some issues with the Euclid 94 interchange. So those are the two big projects that got tapped into this year.
If I can add on to this is a relatively new fee. It was enacted in FY 2008. And so it's taken a little time to collect some money, and we now are beginning to have a bit of a fund balance, and we're letting the appropriate asset owning departments know about it, and they are requesting those funds for their annual CIP projects.
So here's your account, and then here's the wish list.
Correct.
Okay, so there are plenty of projects on that list that need funding.
Absolutely.
And I'm just curious, Mr. Kohut from the City Attorney's Office, you heard what Ms. Rhodes had to say about San Diego having more freedom to spend the money generated here in the city of San Diego that goes to that fund. Do you have enough information to be able to comment on that?
I don't have enough to comment specifically on that. I do know that these funds, the expenditure of these funds are governed under the Transnet ordinance. And so, I mean, we could look into what latitudes we have, but you know, the city works pretty closely with Sandag in expending those funds.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but it would be interesting to know if through a public vote we could capture those funds and use them the way we want to use them without Sandag taking. Did they take a cut off the top?
Well, it's not so much a cut. They administer the funds in cooperation with the city. I mean, certainly this council and the city could always do a public vote and create its own tax and collect it much in the same way Sandag does. But to do things, to amend the Transnet ordinance would also require a public vote.
Gotcha.
Probably of the entire region.
Okay. Well, on the continuum of things that you have to do, and I know that you've got a full plate as well, I'd be curious to know what our options are going forward, and then maybe we could turn that over to the IBA to find out if it would make any significant difference in the amount of money that we have available here in the city to spend on important transportation projects.
I'd be happy to look at that, and I can talk to your staff about that.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Love those magic words, refer to the IBA. So we, Aaron's a good sport. So that, I think, concludes what we've got on this. We have a motion by Mr. Sherman, seconded by Ms. Emerald, to move the item. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on, thank you very much for your report. Moving on to item 5, report from the IBA regarding citywide asset management and identification of capital needs. This is one of my favorite items today. As you may recall, back in January at our first committee meeting, with a unanimous vote, we adopted the recommendations of our committee work plan, which requested that the IBA work with staff on a report regarding current asset management practices and existing needs lists throughout the city. We have Aaron Noel from the IBA here to present what is a very responsive and thorough report that helps us advance the goals of both sections 3 and 5 of the work plan. Ms. Noel, thank you again for this fantastic report. How much time would you need for your presentation?
I need about 12 minutes or so.
Perfect. Please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Kersey and members of the committee. During the Infrastructure Committee meeting on January 28th, our office was requested to report back on current asset management practices and processes for identifying capital infrastructure needs. Our office issued Report 1316, as Chairman Kersey mentioned, on Friday, March 15th, relating to these issues. To provide this information, we coordinated with the Public Works Department, SIPRAC, the Enterprise Asset Management Steering Committee, and also 12 departments or divisions that own, maintain, or have responsibility for infrastructure assets. Just want to make a note that unfunded capital needs for each department are located on the Community Planners Committee website, which is shown here. Just a quick refresher on asset management. We heard about this last month. This is a process to effectively and sustainably manage assets at a desired level of service, both now and in the future, for the lowest life cycle cost. Asset management includes 2 key concepts. The first is a business practice for making decisions on infrastructure based on quality data. And second, a software system for optimizing asset management, repair, rehabilitation, replacement, and funding strategies. We assessed citywide practices based on some key components of asset management. These were goals for desired service levels, asset inventory, condition assessments, asset management systems, and also asset management planning. We also reviewed the extent to which departments are fully funding ongoing annual maintenance. So just for some of the highlights regarding asset management practices, we found that enterprise-funded departments generally have more fully developed programs than general fund departments. This is largely because they are driven by requirements to comply with federal and or state regulations or industry standards. They have identified asset management as an effective business practice for meeting these requirements. And they're also able to provide resources for asset management staff, consultants, and systems. As the city moves forward in implementing citywide asset management and developing a multi-year capital improvement plan, there are a number of challenges and gaps that should be considered and addressed. Firstly, the city has not established goals for desired service levels for many of its assets, which is an important early step in implementing asset management. In setting these goals, it will be important to consider budgetary constraints and existing asset conditions and to obtain public comment on acceptable levels. Note that goals for desired service levels could be based on desired condition. For example, for streets, you could use an overall condition index goal, an average, or a certain percentage of streets being in a certain condition. Next, regarding assessing the condition of assets, the biggest gaps are buildings, sidewalks, and the park system. The city plans to conduct an assessment of buildings in fiscal year 2014. The $1 million estimated cost for the assessment is anticipated to be included in the FY 2014 proposed budget. Public Utilities and potentially Qualcomm and the Environmental Services Department will provide additional funding for including their buildings in the assessment. Regarding sidewalks, the city has not conducted an assessment, as you know. Based on the California Streets and Highway Code, sidewalks are owned and maintained by the adjacent property owners. Given the deteriorating conditions of many sidewalks and based on budget priority raised by Councilmember Kersey, the Street Division has developed cost estimates for conducting an assessment of sidewalks using in-house staff. The projected cost is about $1 million. Note this is a slight increase from the $900,000 that we reported in our report. This is the late breaking news on Friday afternoon. It includes hiring 2 junior engineers and 14 student engineers and the associated costs to conduct an assessment for about 5,000 miles of sidewalks. The staff would be potentially hired on a limited basis for the time needed to conduct the assessment, which is currently estimated to be about 1 year. Cost for the sidewalks assessment may potentially be included in the proposed 2014 budget. It is important to note that funding has not been identified for the condition assessment of park system assets, which has been recommended since 2002 as the first step for a master plan. The estimated cost of the assessment is between $300,000 and $1 million, depending on whether it is conducted by a consultant or by in-house staff. As shown here, the department is responsible for maintaining and operating a significant number of assets and has a potentially large backlog of deferred capital. So the rough in-house estimate from the Park and Rec Department is about $121 million, but this is not all-inclusive, and the number is likely much higher. And Park and Rec has extremely limited resources for funding capital projects. Conducting an assessment will provide a valid list of deferred capital park system projects, which would be eligible to utilize future deferred capital bond funding, similarly to streets, buildings, and storm drains. Regarding asset management systems, these are efficient tools for asset tracking, maintenance, determining the residual life cycle and replacement costs of an asset, optimizing operation and maintenance investments, optimizing capital investments, assisting with determining funding strategies, and assisting with the replacement of assets. These systems are particularly important given the large numbers of assets and significant amount of information that must be collected and analyzed to put in place optimized and cost-effective asset management strategies. 4 departments, Fire Rescue, Police, Library, and Park and Rec, currently lack these systems, and the remaining systems in the city do not interface with one another or with the city's financial system. Notably, Public Utilities is developing an SAP EAM system over the next 3 years at a cost of about $20 million, which will provide a foundation for the other asset-owning departments to leverage for their own SAP EAM rollout, likely for a significantly lower cost. Ongoing annual maintenance is vital for maintaining the condition of assets. Due to tight financial constraints, many departments are not fully funding ongoing annual maintenance, which contributes to deferred maintenance and capital costs and increases future repair costs as the assets further deteriorate. Facilities Division is an important example of chronic underfunding of ongoing maintenance because its work affects many city departments. Current funding for the Facilities Division is significantly below the level needed to keep up with necessary maintenance and repairs, largely due to a 23% reduction in budgeted positions since FY 2004. Facilities Division's limited budget has challenged staff to a point where over the past few years, the division has been primarily reactive and focused on corrective repairs rather than preventative maintenance. In January of this year, the division reported a backlog of over 1,600 uncompleted work orders. Based on a recent sustainability model, Facilities Division estimates a $30 million deficiency. This is basically the difference between what they're projecting they would need in annual maintenance, $47 million, and what they're currently funded at, about $17 million. The division may request a $6 million annual ramp-up over 5 years, beginning in FY14. While the city may not be able to fully fund maintenance in fiscal year 2014, it is important to include in the multi-year capital improvements plan that will likely be developed this year realistic projections for needed ongoing maintenance and goals for addressing deficiencies in Facilities Division and other departments. San Francisco and Denver are examples of cities that include ongoing maintenance in the multi-year capital plans. even though this is still, funding is still coming from the general fund for ongoing maintenance, they want to show it as part of their capital plan. Now I want to switch gears just slightly and discuss how departments identify capital improvement needs regarding both existing and new assets. As we discussed, asset management can provide a sound basis for identifying capital needs for existing assets because it provides an optimal schedule for rehabilitation and for replacement. It can also provide information on the need for new infrastructure based on projections for increased capacity. However, there are other important sources for identifying needs for new infrastructure, such as the general plan, community and financing plans, specific studies on assets like Citygate, departmental master and capital improvement plans, and also public input. Master and multi-year capital improvement plans outline short and long-term capital investment needs for both existing and new infrastructure. We reviewed whether departments had master or capital improvement plans, as well as their processes for identifying and prioritizing capital infrastructure needs. Overall, the process for identifying capital needs is decentralized, varies by department, and generally depends on resources and funding available to the department. Note again that unfunded capital needs for each department, the lists are located on the CPC website. Enterprise-funded departments, not surprisingly, generally have master plans and more fully developed processes for identifying and prioritizing projects. One example is public utilities. While they use Council Policy 800-14, they've also developed some additional criteria specific to their industries to help them better prioritize projects. One of the reasons is they must comply, again, with federal and state regulations or industry standards. Often this is required in order to receive funding and grants. And also, enterprise departments generally have more available resources for planning. General fund departments generally have some type and level of master or capital plans, but may not incorporate all of their assets into the plan. For example, Park and Rec lacks an overall plan, but has a 5-year golf plan. Some departments have a plan that only focuses on new infrastructure, which increases the risk that existing infrastructure will not be fully addressed. Essentially, capital planning should be a balance of addressing needs of existing infrastructure and adding new infrastructure, like fire stations, to address community needs. In closing, making sound and informed decisions regarding infrastructure investment is particularly important for the city given valid and competing priorities for limited resources. Implementing asset management will provide key data and information on assets so that decision makers can identify the most effective maintenance and CIP investment strategies. Asset management also allows community involvement in determining what an acceptable level of assets is while informing decision makers and citizens of the impacts that deferring investments will have on the system. And that concludes my remarks.
Well, that is some impeccable timing. Thank you, Ms. Noel. Exactly 12 minutes. Thank you very much. We have no public comments this morning on this item, and just a point that this is an informational item only, so we don't need a motion on this. We're just receiving and discussing this report. Do we have any council committee questions or comments on this? Okay.
I do. This new SAP EAM system, another $20 million. Is this in addition to the money that has already been invested, or is that all part of the 50+ million that's already going into designing an SAP system? So it's frustrating to hear that the SAP still is not really up and going the way it was originally designed. And how long before it is?
Yes, good morning. I'm Susan Bowman with the Public Utilities Department, and I can answer that for you. The implementation that we're taking on, which is the EAM portion of SAP, it's not; those costs are not included in that $50 million. This is for the $20 million is for the EAM module. It's a separate business process within SAP that has not been implemented as part of the overall citywide SAP ERP implementation. We do have in the city, there is an older version of SAP EAM in place that's in place for streets, communications, and the print shop. That system is a system that's not compatible with our existing SAP. It needs to be upgraded. So one of the efforts that we're going to go through when we do put ours in place is to build ours so that that instance can be moved over to the citywide, but they are separate processes.
Okay, and what's the timetable? Do we have one?
For the public utilities effort, we're looking at about 3 years.
From today?
From today, yes.
You've been working on it how long?
We've had it in concept phase for a couple of years, but in actually beginning to get our the RFPs in order and the other effort is probably about a year. Again, we have 3 existing maintenance management systems and at least 30 to 40 other systems that feed information into those systems or that produce information. And so it is a large undertaking for our department to bring all of that effort together.
And I understand it. I get it. It's not as easy as just plugging a program into your laptop and going forward. You have to basically create from the ground up, don't you?
Correct.
Still, it is a frustration. It's got to be a real frustration for you and all those who are hands-on with these projects, trying to do assessments, trying to bring everything together so that we can start merging the information we need to be able to go out in a holistic and sort of three-dimensional way to plan for the community and prioritize projects and so forth.
Yes, exactly, and that's what our goal is with this project. So we're taking measured steps to make sure that we actually can reach that goal.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate your doing. And what does EAM stand for again?
Enterprise Asset Management. It's the more commonly used term for all of these issues that we're discussing. In the past, these systems had been referred to as computerized maintenance management systems, but EAM conveys a more complete look at assets.
And let's hope that that's what we achieve ultimately within our lifetime here. All right, thank you so very much. I do appreciate that. But this does get in the way of what it is that I know that the chair of this committee has said he wants to achieve, and I know that the rest of us on the council want to achieve, and that is, again, to understand what's happening with all of our assets and where we need to put priorities and how to do comprehensive planning. So however we can nudge this process along, light a fire under it, I don't know, but that probably wasn't the right term. I think we need to. It's got to be a priority, and somehow I think we've got to get our collective heads around it and get this SAP up and going the way it was originally at least pitched to us so many years ago. Thank you.
My concern is how it is in the technology world. By the time we get this thing up and running, it's going to be obsolete. We're going to need another $50 million for the next system down the road. So, I mean, however we can get this thing moving quicker, the better.
Agreed. Thank you, Ms. Zimmer, for those comments. I agree wholeheartedly. And Mr. Sherman as well. On the sidewalks, again, thank you for this report. On the sidewalk issue, first of all, this is great, the fact that the condition assessments are projected to be about $1 million or perhaps a little bit less. There was a report in the LA Times a few weeks ago that the city of Los Angeles had gotten a bid for something like $10 million to do a sidewalk condition assessment up there, and there's practically a revolt. So, and they did, as a result, they didn't do it. So I'm pleased to hear that our staff has diligently come up with a way to do it for far less than that. Do I see John from our streets department? I thought I saw, there he is. Could you just briefly walk us through how that would work? I mean, are we literally going to have people walking the whole city, and would we also be able to identify locations where there aren't sidewalks? And is there possibly ways to engage the public to help us out with this?
Yes, we will basically employ students that would be able to walk the entire 5,000 miles. The intent would be to assess the existing condition and also ramps as well. The one thing it does not include is, or it will identify those areas where we have issues with the street height versus the curb height. We would have to then go back and address that as a a separate study, because that has to do more with the overall the overall height of the street, for instance, and would be more of a hydrology study, which I think Council District 3 did a study back in 2010 for certain areas of District 3. So we would identify that as a part of this study moving forward. We would identify those locations, break that out as a separate study, and actually do a condition assessment of the existing walkways and curbs.
And that could identify areas where there aren't sidewalks, but perhaps there should be as well?
Yeah, as we walk through the areas, we would also identify locations where we don't have existing walkways.
Okay, perfect. Do you see ways that we could engage the public on this to have them help us out?
I think there's a possibility to have them assist, but I think in order to make sure that the data is captured in a consistent manner, we would want to have some controls in place and be able to capture that information internally. And we have some plans as to how we would do that using electronic devices to help us capture that data.
Okay. Okay, great. That makes sense. If this item was included in our next budget as we go through that cycle that's going to start here pretty soon, how quickly do you think you could hire the staff necessary to actually start doing this?
Well, we should be able to get hiring students. You know, when we talk about the fact that we would hire 14 students, that would be 14 full-time equivalents, and so it would actually be more students because they typically only work about 20 hours a week. So we're actually looking at probably more than that. We think if we work with SDSU and UCSD, that if we let them know this is a project that we want to embark on, that we would have the ability to move quickly on that and probably hire students within a 3-month time frame. We would also have to employ some additional hardware, so it would also take a little bit of time to procure that hardware. Probably the hardware procurement would actually take longer than the hiring students.
Okay.
So anywhere from 3 to 5 months to mobilize, and then we should be able to move forward.
And would Streets be able to do that yourselves, or would it have to go through purchasing and contracting?
We would have to procure the equipment through purchasing and contracting.
Okay. God help you. All right. I'm sorry, was that out loud? Thank you very much, Don. We appreciate that. Another question I have is, Mr. Heinrichs here, there he is, on the facilities condition assessments. I've certainly been a strong supporter of updating and getting comprehensive assessment of all of our city facilities. I see in the IBA's report that they talk about 600 facilities of our roughly 1,700 citywide being included. I think it said something about maybe that representing about half the total square footage that the city has. I'd personally like to see this be comprehensive. Why not go for all 1,700?
Well, we'll do as many facilities as we can afford. We have $1 million in the budget request for FY14. We're trying to get at least 600. If we can leverage off of the previous consultant reports that we did a few years ago, then we'll add more buildings. But we'll try to get the vast majority of them.
Okay. Okay, great. When it comes to maintenance spending, the report talks about upping our maintenance spending by about $6 million per year each of the next 5 years, which would get us to, I believe, the minimum industry standard of 2% of replacement value, which obviously is a goal. We need to be maintaining our assets. What kind of service level would that take our facilities to if we were able to find that $5 million, or $6 million rather, for the next 5 years? Would that really just keep us at the status quo, or where would that get us?
Well, I think it would, if we were able to achieve that, first of all, the 2 to 4% replacement cost value range is something that the federal government recommended as a benchmark several years ago. And even if you just went with a minimum 2%, if we were able to achieve that funding base, I think that we would definitely get to the status quo level on buildings, and probably that would equate to a good condition overall.
Oh, okay. Good. Very good. When it comes to the facilities that are maintained, it says in the report that facilities does some of the maintenance, but that fire rescue, police, library, park and rec do their own inventories as well as some of their own maintenance. And it looks like it's fairly decentralized. And I believe it said that at least a couple of the departments were looking for facilities to take over that maintenance. And I guess what I'm wondering is what your opinion of that is, what the capacity of the facilities department is, given the report we heard in the budget committee last week that there's a lot of vacancies and it for some reason takes, it seems like it takes longer to hire people in the facilities department than it does in some other places. Just if you could comment on that general topic.
Well, I think the length of time it takes to fill vacancies is pretty consistent across departments. It can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months working through the personnel system to be able to bring new employees on, whether they're in the Public Works Department, the Library Department, or Park and Rec. It just takes a long time. What I can tell you also is that this past year, Facilities Division has been working with all their client departments, Park and Rec, the Library Department, Fire Rescue, Police Department, and others to do the best that we can to centralize maintenance. Some of these departments over the years have elected to do their own, but because of budget cutbacks, they're beginning to realize that they just don't have the resources any longer to do that. So they've been making more and more demands on the Facilities Division to do their maintenance for them. So in the model that was referenced in the IBA report, we're trying to look citywide at what the facility maintenance needs are. And departments like the Library Department and Park and Rec want us to do more and more of their routine maintenance, fire rescue as well.
And are there efficiencies that are gained by having a centralized system in that regard?
Absolutely. Rather than have every department have its own maintenance workforce, which is very inefficient, it's better to pool those resources and then deploy them as necessary.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Ms. Zimmerman.
Just one more question for you, Tony. We're talking about the 2 to 4% of the net worth of the assets, and that's sort of a benchmark. Where are we now?
I would say we're probably less than half of, or less than a 0.5%. We're nowhere near where we need to be to follow that benchmark.
Gotcha. And what are those in raw numbers? Do you have a sense?
Well, right now, if you were to achieve the 2% mark on an annual basis, that would be about a $47 million annual investment. And we're at 47 million, and we're about 17 million right now, so we're 30 million short.
Gotcha. And that was singled out in the IB report, too.
Right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Ms. Zimmerman. Do we have anybody here from Parks and Rec, by chance? I don't see Ms. Lemedico. No, I don't see anybody. Maybe the IBA could just make a note of this. When it comes to Parks and Rec, they've talked about a park master plan, and I'm wondering how that kind of fits in with our 5-year infrastructure plan goal in terms of what they need to do condition assessments, if there's anything potentially in the budget for that. I think you, Aaron, you called out in your report that it was going to cost between $300,000 and $1 million to do the condition assessments of our park and rec system. I will take note that in our park system assets list, we do have apparently a city-owned cemetery, which is interesting, and I did not know, and I'd be interested to know, I guess, more about that in terms of if that makes us some revenue or how that works. So anyway, if we could just get more information from Parks and Rec on what their 5-year plan is and how that fits in. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, when I was going through this, there's quite a lot of information, but Park and Rec did really jump out because they have so many assets. They definitely have a huge backlog that, they have a list of unfunded needs, and they are really they've been wanting to do a master plan. That's something that was recommended in the general plan when that was updated. So it's been, a big, great need that just hasn't been able to find a funding source. But what I was trying to ask Park and Rec is to break out the number for the condition assessment. And the condition assessment is really just the first step in the master plan, but certainly a very important step. And so the amount of $300,000 to $1 million is what they provided to me. You know, if they were doing a more small-scale in-house effort, it would be about $300,000. If they were going to hire a consultant to do a more comprehensive assessment, it would be about $1 million. So they're trying to be flexible because they really want to move forward on this. They don't have really now the opportunity to be getting the deferred capital bond funding as some of the other departments, and that's clearly that's something that they need to be able to move towards given their limited resources.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Okay, so when it comes to the deferred capital and our upcoming third bond as part of that program, it looks like we have in the attachments that you put in your report several documents, mostly from enterprise departments, that develop something that resemble 5-year infrastructure plans. We have, I think in here, we got airports, public utilities, Qualcomm Stadium, Golf, Street Division, and the RTIP as well. It seems like something that might help us in terms of getting to a 5-year infrastructure plan for the whole city. It would be if we could consolidate those separate ones that we have now into one document. Is that something that you saw as you were putting this together?
Yes, definitely. As we've been thinking through the idea about a multi-year capital plan, there are a number of existing plans that could be pulled together. That would be a very, logical first step in doing that.
Okay, great. And is that something that your office, and when I say your office, I mean you, could work with in conjunction with our committee, and when I say our committee, I mean ALMAS, to put that, start putting those together?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we could do.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for that. I appreciate that. Let's see here, just a couple more questions, and then we'll be done with this item. When it comes to, and this, I don't know if this would be a question for you or for Mr. Nagelvort, but when it comes to, we've got a CIP website right now, and there's some great data on there, given that the city had nothing before. I'm curious, could we include maps of all the city facilities, storm drains, our channel network, map of the wastewater network and facilities, streetlight map? I've even heard we've had a request for a map of all the city trees. Is this something that we could utilize GIS data and put this out there for the public to be able to see? Mr. Nagelvort.
Fortunately, I'm not a department of one. Good morning, everybody. James Nagelvort, Assistant Director for Public Works and City Engineer. I'm going to give you a two-part answer. The answer is yes, as long as the data exists, and a lot of that data does exist in terms of where pipelines and storm drains and things like that exist, and parks and fire stations and that. But it's important, I'm going to recommend that we actually would separate the two, because the CIP website is about capital improvement projects, your future facilities that are in design and construction. And I think what you guys are talking about is you're talking about existing facilities. And what's missing in the CIP website, and it might confuse the issue, is the condition assessments, the information about existing facilities, which are far greater. We've got about 900 projects. But when you start talking about asset management, you're talking about existing facilities, you're probably talking, depending how you break them up, you're talking about millions. And that, so my gut is this sounds like a great discussion for us to take back to SIPRAC about talking about how do we modify a website to separate it from the capital improvement projects, but then still make that information available, because a lot of the information is electronic already.
Good.
It's already in a GIS layer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's fantastic news. Okay, definitely. We'll be working with you further on that, and that actually feeds into our next item as well. So, okay. Well, we have no action with this report, but again, thank you very much for your hard work. This is fantastic. Thank you, Aaron. All right. Moving on to item 6. We have a presentation from Joe LaCava, Jeffrey Johnson, Ari Isaac, Carl Nettleton, and Eric Busboom regarding innovations in infrastructure, integrating GIS technology, mobile apps, and crowdsourcing into infrastructure planning. And gentlemen, I believe you have a presentation today. Before these guys get going, while they're loading that up, I just want to give the committee and the public a bit of background here. In Section 4 of our committee work plan, which describes our community engagement strategy, this committee laid out a desire to work with our innovation and nonprofit sectors to develop tools for interactive community feedback and to allow individual community members to provide input with the same access as recognized groups. At the last meeting, we heard some testimony that although community planning groups do good work and are recognized bodies before the city, having opportunities for direct access by individuals from the comfort of their own phone or home would help advance our desire to solicit feedback. In the work plan, one of this committee's action items was to develop additional interactive opportunities for community engagement through the use of web-based technology. So who knew that within minutes of that occurring, in terms of our work plan, the committee would hear from a number of individuals and groups that are interested in speeding this process along and helping this committee and the city come up with innovative ideas to utilize technology. As a tech guy myself, this is something that is near and dear to my heart, and we talked about the CIP website already. And you know, the public obviously being very interested in mobile apps, I think that there may be an avenue there as well to increase that kind of interaction. So I would very much am looking forward to this report, as well as things like crowdsourcing and whether there's opportunities there. So gentlemen, how much time do you need today?
I think I'm going to do about a minute or 2 minutes and then 5 minutes for each of the individuals. And if it's the preference of the chair, we'll do all of our presentations and then do Q&A. That's perfect? That's fine.
All righty.
And I'll be a little bit of the control person, since I'm a control freak anyway.
You'll be the MC, Jeff.
Yeah, there you go.
All righty.
That's probably a better word. Well, I am Joe LaCava, and I do appreciate the chair and the committee taking the time to extend this conversation and do it in an open format. You're going to hear from a lot of different speakers. There's going to be some overlap, but they're different pieces of the puzzle, and I think you'll understand why you need to hear from all of them. This is really kind of a continuation of not only the previous item, but also the conversation of the presentation that I made last week about the lessons that we learned from the public participation in the CIP budgeting effort. Since last month, the promises have been made to hit the ground running, and we certainly have done that. A couple of items that are of particular interest to me is that the CPC is going to be working with Public Works to update the council policy on prioritizing CIP projects, which is important in terms of once we identify the projects, how do we decide when and where to fund them. The committee has already started working on developing a new council policy that has been tentatively called Neighborhood Input on Infrastructure Needs. And then just as a reminder, the planning groups are gearing up to start their 2015 discussions in July. And both of those items will help, as well as the other work that we're talking about. You may remember from my presentation last month that one of the things that we learned was that we need to improve the city's website to provide information in user-friendly formats. And just to start to drill down on what the other individuals will talk about in a more sophisticated way, but from my layperson's perspective, what we're talking about is what is called browse and explore, not text and search. In other words, use graphics, use maps. People can relate to those a lot easier. Cut across city departments, start eliminating the silos that we see in terms of individual needs and information in different parts of the website where you kind of have to hunt and search for that. Provide current best status and data. People want to know where those CIP projects in the neighborhoods are, where they are in the design phase, the planning stage, when they're going to start construction, how the construction is going. And that can and should be all available on the city's website. Allow for crowdsourcing ideas and voting on priorities. This talks a little bit about that sidewalk assessment that was discussed earlier. But there are lots of proven ways that we can use the city website and new technologies so that rather than submit a pothole complaint to the city, you put it on a map and other people can vote and prioritize those improvements. Also, standardized submittal of planning group recommendations. You may remember last year we submitted them in all sorts of format, which put a lot of burden on staff to understand and digest and incorporate. If we can standardize that through an online submittal, it would be helpful. And then I probably can't emphasize this enough. We have to remember that a portion of our community does not have access to the internet and computers on a regular basis. So we have to do things in a way that crosses that digital divide and also eliminates the language barrier. The bottom line, we just simply want to build on the city's good work to date and improve the usability and increase participation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ari. I'm going to talk about GIS. Let me switch over.
Okay.
Here.
I'm on
You're on
the desktop.
Oh, okay. And which? This one. Switch.
Hello, my name is Ari Isaac. I'm the owner of excuse me. Ari Isaac. I'm the owner of Vivari GIS Consulting. We're a emerging local business enterprise with the City of San Diego and an Esri business partner. And I'm here to talk about what is possible with the technology today. Technology has changed drastically over the last few years, and like for instance, we're all probably connected right now to databases, whether we're updating our Facebook pages or whatever, we all probably have access to that right in our pockets. There's no reason that we can't use those technologies to benefit, the goals of this body. Currently, we're actually doing this already with the City of San Diego streetlight conversion job. So this is a, excuse me. This is a job to convert over 35,000 streetlights in the City of San Diego, so over half of the streetlights. The vast majority of them are the Cobra Head streetlights. So we've outfitted the prime contractor with iPads and Wi-Fi devices. The guys in the field go to the iPad and they encounter a drop-down list associated with each point, and they select whether the light is 120 volt or 240 volt. They can update, write freehand notes and collect pictures about each street light. It's real easy. The last thing they do is they change the conversion status, so they say that the light's converted. That's immediately updated on a website so that everybody can see what the issue is. So this is already in place. It's been placed since the notice to proceed in November 2011. It hasn't been down for one day. But I think it's important to cover that this is the contractor system. This is not the city's system that people are using. So there's no work that's being done by the city in terms of IT. So what my goal is to suggest that on these contracts where contractors are impacting or touching or looking at our infrastructure, that we empower them, or in the RFP identify that they collect information about our infrastructure so that we can make real-time decisions. So this all happens in real time, and it seems to be a valuable tool. So we already have value in terms of doing that, but there's more that we can do. So you currently have the CIP website, which is on the right, and then we have the streetlight data that's on our site, and it's real easy to combine those two. So if we continue to take this, go down this road, we could talk about many contractors all updating the city website for you. These are map services, so basically it's just integrating the code on the website and updating your the information in real time. So you could have your asphalt overlay work being updated in real time at the same time that your streetlight work is, or and we could take it another step. So let's say the city implemented something on the sidewalk effort, and they're doing it in-house. The city could provide that kind of thing, and it could be shown on the same website or many websites if that was advantageous. I think generally my point is just that it's easy to collect this information, and we're really not talking about $20 million EAM system at all. That's not the range of what we're talking about. In many cases, we can implement this type of system for less than 1% of the overall contract. So let's talk about what kind of contracts this could work with. So this is the job that's on the street right now. It's due on Friday. This is the consultant services for programmatic water transmission pipeline conditions assessment. So it's directly in line with the goals of this committee. It's to look at 31 water transmission lines, and it's a total of 132 miles of transmission lines. So this is a $6.5 to $8 million job with that's going to take over 5 years. So if you go to the next page, there's a map that identifies all the areas that are going to be looked at. So all these areas are within your districts. And if you look on the right, it identifies the current our current GIS requirements for this job. And so basically what I'm suggesting is that we further formalize those requirements. So it basically says you need to help us get this data into a GIS-friendly format at the end of the job. So that means you're not going to see this data until 5 years from now, plus whatever it takes to implement whatever work needs to be done on the city side. And it can be set up so that it happens instantaneously. The next page has a series of opportunities that are out right now. All these jobs are impacting or they're doing conditions assessment of large, $4.5 million water job where you can collect information about what condition things are in, what material things are in. And I think it's just sort of a loss for your contractors to be touching all this information, but not getting some back to integrate into your system. On the right, there's this little city contract types. So if they're saying asphalt overlay, you guys have $10 million worth of asphalt overlay jobs. They can spend less than 1% in reality to get that information back to you. When was it paved? What was it paved with? Let's take a picture maybe that could be shared across, as sort of a public, to share with the public. The water jobs, wastewater. So these MAC contracts, these are gargantuan contracts where these people are touching everything. These contractors are touching all of your information, and we really should be using this this type of technology with them. I mean, they don't use GIS at all for the guys that won the original contract, the first MAC contract that was coming out. So on the last page here, so I'm Ari Isaac. The folks on the right are stakeholders that I've talked to about this idea. Everybody has sort of a different concept related to this. Brad Lind, he's the head of the executive director of SanGIS. He's obviously interested in collecting good data, whereas Donna Fry has open government concerns. But I suggest that we, bring all the stakeholders in and engage them. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Eric Busboom. I'm the founder and director of a new organization, the San Diego Regional Data Library. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. The Data Library's role is to help civic and social organizations get data they need. And to a large degree, that means helping get data out of government departments and government services and getting it into the hands of the people who need it outside of government. In many ways, that also will involve working with government departments to synthesize the data, collect it, and put it in a form that other people find useful. Last month, Joe talked about some improvements to the CIP's website, and in particular mentioned the need for city data to be in user-friendly formats. And that's what we'll be talking about today, is what a user-friendly format is and how that integrates with the process that you're going on in updating the CIP websites. The most common analysis tool for data is Excel. There's a few other tools that people find so readily available to access data. You'll find that lots and lots of people are asking questions that are not adequately handled on most mapping applications. Now, what I want to say here is not that you should, I don't suggest to derail or delay any of the mapping applications. They're very important for providing a full picture of how to use information. But there are other ways that while you're working on that, you can get data out very quickly, allow people to answer the common questions they have. And those include publishing data in Excel files, if you're understanding exactly what kind of questions people are asking, and publishing them in GIS shapefiles, which allow them to integrate them with their own mapping applications. And that by publication, that's just putting a link on a website. It's really nothing more sophisticated than that. And during that time that you have that information out, people can use it while you're making improvements to your website. We'll also talk a little bit about data repositories, which a lot of cities around the country are installing to provide a centralized place to publish data to the public. The first big question for answering how you do a simple publication and how you get information out is asking who those people are. Now, obviously, for this group, the planning groups, the city planning groups are a major stakeholder and major consumer of data, but there's lots of other folks excuse me, elected officials are equally interested in this data, but also nonprofit organizations. Walk San Diego, for instance, wants to know what sidewalk conditions are as well. Other government departments, and residents who are not affiliated with the planning groups. All these folks are interested in understanding and asking questions of the data. And some of those questions are, there's lots of questions they're going to ask, but these are some of the kinds of things. Why is my street torn up, and how long is it going to be torn up? When are you going to get to the project I care about? And the one that most of them are curious about but may not ask directly is my neighborhood getting as much money spent on it as I think it should be? So the data you present should be structured around answering those questions. You can't see this. This is a spreadsheet that Joe sent me about the CIP projects. It's got a lot of useful information on it. It's got these cool links to your map, so you can go from that spreadsheet, get right into the map. And it's a wonderful tool to start with, but if you look at the columns on this, you'll notice it doesn't answer all the questions. There are some easy updates to that spreadsheet that allow you to answer those questions by, for instance, adding the name of the neighborhood to the planning department. You've got a map for it, but what I want to be able to do is search for all the things that are in my neighborhood, which are difficult without much more sophisticated sites. Understanding the total cost of those projects without having to click through them, so that I can look at all the things in my neighborhood and ask, what's the cost for those things? And then, of course, start and end dates so we can see where those projects lie. This isn't a big update. It's actually a more administrative task of adding those things. But by asking the questions of what people are looking for and then adding these information, you can get to answering those questions more broadly. Lots of websites like this one at the Department of Conservation take the really simple approach. They've got on one side the GIS files. You can download into any common GIS browser, but also links to the Excel files. And they look kind of impoverished and low tech, but they're the most accessible way to get this data. For this project, for the CIP website, what we'd like to suggest is that these links go on the map application, so that once you're looking at the map, there's a link at the top that says download all this data as an Excel file. There's lots of other data sets that this committee should consider that include not only the CIP priorities and projects, but also asset lists. Just where's the list of all the fire stations and the, where are the lifeguard stations and other things. Now, those information exists. It's a little difficult to find, and for most people, it's just not accessible at all. Construction permits, what's going on, what's my neighbor doing next door. 311 calls are an important data set that you'll see other cities are publishing that allow people to understand where are the requests for service being made, and other contracted work. Why is my street being repaved, and who's doing that work. Here's an example of a data repository running at San Francisco. San Francisco is a very substantial data repository. In this case, they're publishing 311 calls. They use a service called Open 311. All the calls that go in get published back out to the internet, and you can sort and search on that. Baltimore does the same thing with 311 calls. They also do it with permits, so their basic permit information. This sort of information is available through the county website. Baltimore makes it downloadable as a file you can load right into Excel. Denver is using the open source version of this software. This type of system provides data in a wide variety of formats, so you can get it in whatever format you want. The software itself is also open source and free. Denver probably spent they could have spent less than $5,000 to create this site and get it running, although the data, loading the data in would take a higher cost. So in closing, my suggestion is that when you're thinking about these, look first at the simplest, widest ways of answering the most questions, which often involves just simple data files. And my organization, the library, our goal is getting this data out to people. We'd really like to work with the city on finding what data is available and making it releasable to our primary stakeholders, which are primarily nonprofits and social organizations. And in doing so, that'll make the same data available to residents. So we'd be very happy to help with that. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Carl Nettleson. I have still have a lozenge in my mouth, actually. I'm sorry about that. It'll go away in a minute. I've got a company called Nettleton Strategies, and we work on complex public policy and business issues, and and specialize in facilitated mapping, which is a way to provide consensus, find opportunities for collaboration, and to resolve conflicts. I thought in the interest of time today, I'd not go through a lot of the details, but try to put in context some of the projects that the city has and used GIS for in the past that meet some of the very elements of the work plan that the Infrastructure Committee has put forward. And those projects have benefited the city, and they've used GIS, even though the GIS may not have been apparent at all. So GIS is great, as you've already heard, for visualizing and telling the infrastructure story. And you already know about the power of the internet and GIS technology. Eric just did a good job about talking about Excel spreadsheets. And really, if you think about any map that's using GIS, the Excel spreadsheet in simplest form is what it is, and it has two characteristics. One is there is a location on it. It's either a point, a line, or a polygon. A fire hydrant, a street, or perhaps a park. And attached to that location are the things that you need to know, whether it be project cost or who the project manager is or important pieces like that. And I'd like to suggest that those Excel spreadsheets do not have to be in the same place. They could be in Sandag or Sanjis or Public Works or Streets or Engineering, and they can be utilized in different formats. They can be used on an online format that the public finds useful, sharing the pieces of that Excel spreadsheet that are valuable, or it can be in a server situation within the city where technical departments have the ability to use that same Excel spreadsheet constructed in a different way on a different map. And so why GIS? And I think Jack Dangerman, who is the founder of Esri, the largest software provider of GIS software in the world, says this quote: "Maps are a language, and their power is they communicate intuitively." So you look at a map and you can see context as well as content. You see how pieces fit together. Pieces and perspectives fit together from different departments, different points of view, and all of a sudden they come together. So you don't need much background on defining the infrastructure problem, but from the simple, the potholes, which are persistent and can be helped using GIS mapping apps, to the complex, imagining the future, community plans, general plans, all of these pieces can be helped using GIS. The first story I want to tell you about is Paradise in Progress, and some of you may remember the intense construction that went on beginning in 1999 through 2006. And I, as the Public and Media Affairs Director for the city, was on two marketing committees, the technical committee for the ballpark and the convention center. The marketing folks wanted to put up a sign. They really thought downtown was going to collapse under the load of a 26 square block redevelopment project, doubling the size of the convention center, 30 projects underway, and 100 in the pipeline. They wanted to say, "Pardon our dust." And the construction guys were trying to say, how do we coordinate all this? And they tend to work independently and not together. So we put them all together in a room, about 125 people, and said, we got two choices. We can regulate you, or if you'll share the information about your public impacts, we will take those public impact street closures and lane closures, we will put them on a map, and we will share with you in a regular monthly meeting of the status of where we are. And we did that. And what we did was create a community for the 6 years that I chaired that was able to identify where the conflicts were in advance, solve them in a very simple and easy way, and really create friendships and relationships that allowed downtown to work so smoothly during that period that there was never a story in the Union Tribune about any impact that was onerous to the public, nor was there ever a story that 10 organization collaboration even existed. So, good news is no news, right? And we called it a quiet success and said it would have been a noisy failure. And I bring that up because GIS is quiet. If it works well, you don't see it. It pierces right through all of the conflict and takes you to the problem solving. So it's not something that you put on the headline in the Union Tribune, as you noticed. It's something that helps you. And as Civic San Diego says, that project is one of the most innovative of its kind in the United States. I'll share another story that you're probably all familiar with, a like kind of story. And prior to that, I was handling public outreach for the Municipal Wastewater Department's $1.5 billion outreach in the 90s. And I drove up a street on the way to a very contentious pipeline meeting. And that street had been paved. And so you can imagine what the outcry was at the meeting when the folks who knew that that street was going to be torn up in about 6 months to put a pipeline in, how well our presentations went. So after the Parrot Action Progress got underway, we said, what if we did the same kind of thing, the Parrot Action Progress kind of solution for the city's public works in the right-of-way? And we did. It's called City Works. It started in about 2000. It was still online last year. I don't know how and why it went away, but the idea was it coordinated all of the city construction projects in every phase of construction. You could go online on the web and see whatever project you wanted. It had the construction manager's name, telephone number, cost, duration, all of that kind of stuff. And there were two benefits that we saw that were important over and above the map. One is that every construction manager would go to the map to put their project in. They had to fill in the database, and they would see what other projects were there. So, and other project managers already in there would check it periodically to make sure. So you had coordination between all the departments without doing any management of it, just saying, if you look, you'll see. And in that period of time, I don't recall that we had the kind of mistakes, if you will, that happened to me going up that road on the pipeline project, and the second part of it was we wanted the public information officers and the project managers to go out to the community to be able to put on the map on the screen at those communities their project, but also be able to share the projects in the neighborhood that were going to happen in the near future, so that it would show coordination of how the city worked with each other. The next project was for a client who wanted to integrate airport planning with community and transportation planning. It's in 2007. And the idea was that the airport could move to the other side of the runway on that vacant land and also use land between Pacific Highway and Interstate 5. And so we used GIS to do rough estimates of what the land use was, and found out that a lot of it was either in public ownership or already being used for airport parking or rental cars or those kinds of things. We found out who owned the properties and what other issues might be around there. So, and we used rough 3-scale models to figure out where the spacing would be in the view sheds and those kinds of things. And then basically this property, all property here, could be used for it. And as the progression went, and we talked to the agencies and incorporated transportation issues and others into it, came up with an imagined intermodal transportation center that linked all of San Diego's transportation with the airport in such a way that it would really be really a national model for how to link transportation planning. And the results of that were that the mayor led an 8-month policy meeting with the leaders of the transportation agencies, and that work is still, I think, shaping some of the work that goes on at Lindbergh Field today. And finally is the Tijuana River Valley Recovery Team. Some of you will also recall that there were lawsuits about how to clean up wastewater in the Tijuana River Valley, and should we do it in Tijuana, should we do it on this side of the border? When those were done, the head of the regional board and I got together and said there might be a new time for collaboration. We used facilitating mapping to understand the past, present, and future of the Tijuana River Valley involving all of the agencies. And by figuring out what the perspectives were for now, the present, and the future, we're able to using a grant from the Sempra Energy Foundation, we were able to shape this recovery team, and that resulted in a recovery strategy which shows the future uses of the valley and prioritize projects to do it. Finally, I want to share with you an exciting new concept that's emerging called the Geo Village. This is a concept for planning, development, and operation of a GIS infrastructure to support sustainable and resilient community development. And if you think about this in terms of nodes of a community group and other interests, being able to each input their own views of the world, and that those come together in a common format so folks can see what others are doing. It's a very powerful new tool. Finally, I think you know that GIS is not just about maps. You can do everything from inventory assets to coordination to analysis to storytelling to collaborative tools that I've talked about in imagining the future. So that's my presentation. I'd be happy to take questions later. Thank you.
That was a great presentation. I'm a GIS guy, my day job. I'm actually going to talk about something a little bit different, but that was a great presentation about the power of GIS. So I'm Jeff Johnson, and I spoke at the last month's meeting, and I'm the Code for America Brigade Captain. I explained a little bit about Code for America, but I'd just like to talk about two aspects of this project information website and community input tool set. So our brigade is proposing to work with you, this committee, and the other stakeholders to improve the CIP website and to help work with Joe to operationalize the community input process. So the CIP project information website, in order to make it easy for citizens to find out, to answer the questions that Eric talked about, what's going on in my neighborhood, when is this project going to get started? The website that's there has all the information, but I think we need to take another pass at it with a clear focus on usability and really think about the users. What are the use cases? What are they trying to do? And make sure we focus on that rather than just saying the information's there. So and as Joe said, it should be focused on browsing and exploring the CIP projects, whether by map or by type, but it should be focused on really allowing citizens to get in there and easily, quickly browse and explore what's going on. And it should help them answer those basic questions that Eric talked about. What's going on in my area? What's coming up? So the current CIP project provides all the basic information, but it suffers from really common usability problems. I actually looked at it with the user experience guy at my day job, and he listed out probably 25 things that are really, really common usability problems with that website. I don't think we need to get into them, but I think we're kind of aware of the issues that are there. There's a lot of technical jargon. It's not always like this doesn't tell me what's going on, how much money's been spent. Ari spoke about getting real-time updates on these things. I think that's also a fantastic idea. So I'd like to propose kind of redoing this CIP website and leveraging the same basic infrastructure. One thing that hasn't been touched on here is that those websites are driven by an ArcGIS server that serves up an API, and that API is there. We can use it, build on it, do things with it. So I think that we could leverage the same basic infrastructure but take a focus on usability. So the proposed improvements would be an easily browsable and usable interface, eliminating terminology that citizens don't really understand. Make the map interface much easier to use, get around, include a map directly in the project detail pages, include more up-to-date and detailed and comprehensible project status information, and as Eric said, publish the raw data in easy-to-use format. So one of my Code for America colleagues worked on a project very similar, not exactly the same thing, but in Macon County in Georgia, and this is for their municipal tax referendum. And this website is just a lot easier to use. Click around, browse things, look exactly what's going on a map, compare funding categories, look at the current spend, the projected spend, that kind of thing. And so that's the website to present what's going on with projects that are currently ongoing. But as Joe talked about, I think we need to work on building a community input tool set that makes it easy for citizens to provide input about infrastructure improvements that they care about. And I think in order to do that, we need to have like a formal crowdsourcing tool, and that should be focused on collecting structured input in an easy-to-use interface, and that it should also let citizens voice their support for projects that were already proposed by the departments or by other citizens. And then that same tool should allow the community planning groups and other community-based organizations to aggregate that input and present it back to the city in formats that are easily digestible by Department of Public Works or other departments. I think Joe went through quite a bit of work last year to aggregate things, and even then it took a lot of staff time. So I think we've heard this term a little bit here. What's crowdsourcing? And that you asked Mark about how can we get citizens involved in the sidewalk? And that's really what crowdsourcing is. It's the practice of obtaining the services or ideas or content by soliciting contributions from a large group of people, and especially from online community rather than from traditional employees or suppliers or even students, as was mentioned. So this is another Code for America project that some of my colleagues worked on, local data, and that started out as they worked on it through the fellowship, and now they've become a company, and it's all open source, so I can just stand it up and use it here in San Diego if I want to. But it's focused on a few things, collecting information from a phone or on the website, and also if you don't have a smartphone or can't get out to the web very easily, you can do it in paper-based formats. And these lists of formats here on the bottom are, again, back to the very simple formats that Eric talked about, CSV or Excel files, KML for Google Earth, shape files, and JSON. So this is a pretty interesting tool set. There's a lot of other ones that are useful for crowdsourcing. So I wanted to bring up a couple of important principles as you go down this road. I think that in order to make these kinds of projects make sure that they don't put a strain on existing IT resources, that this committee should look at hosted cloud-based applications rather than asking IT department to set things up and maintain them. And the tools should be focused on open standards, and often that just means simplistic formats, de facto standards like Excel and KML and things like that, and should provide them in commonly used formats and let other people reuse them and build on them. And I think Joe brought this up as well, but in order to make this process as inclusive as possible, reaching out across the digital divide should really be a huge priority here. So my recommendations and our recommendations as a group are this committee could work with our brigade, our group here, to carry out an initial research and prototyping phase in the next 60 days. And that's really like a zero-cost thing. It's all open-source applications. It's going to require staff time and my time and Joe's time, but there are really no hard cost here. It's all open source, free as in freedom, and in this case also perhaps free as in free beer. But so this initial phase should also include time to reach out to employees in the departments and the CPGs to really understand the process and get a grasp on their needs and ideas. And at the end of this, the result of that should be a prototype website that can be evaluated for usability and suitability, and also a formal set of recommendations and a timeline and a budget for taking that and making it sustainable. Because we can stand up a prototype, do some tests at zero cost, but in order to make that sustainable over time, there are obviously hard costs involved in that, and you guys should have you should understand what those are. So that's it. You can get in touch with me there. That's our websites. And then, I guess we're open for questions.
Okay. And then just to kind of wrap it up, we appreciate the committee's patience to listen to a lot of smart people, throw a lot of information out to you. I think the overarching context is that the idea here is to build on the good work that's been done by city staff and city departments already, and to also dovetail with the various initiatives that we hear coming from the mayor's office and that this committee is trying to do. From a layperson's point of view, I try to break it down as simple as possible, and I think the three key things that I heard in terms of recommendations that this committee might consider is, one, to create a policy that GIS should be a part of every contract that the city lets in terms of infrastructure that only provides the end results but also real-time monitoring so that the city departments, the elected officials, the average citizen can understand what's going on. A policy for open data. That's a little more far-reaching, but it is now kind of a wave that's going across the country that everything the city has should be accessible to the average citizens. Certainly exceptions for confidential, such as HR and proprietary and security issues, but put everything in open data format so that anybody can access it. And then the last one is the one that Jeff mentioned, a demonstration project to come back to you within 60 days, demonstrating what is possible, and then also talk about budget of what it would take to sustain that stuff. But again, the key is to build on what the city already has going forward. So with that, as Jeff said, we're open for questions.
Well, thank you all very much. We appreciate those presentations. We do have one member of the public who would like to speak on this item, Corrine Wilson. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Kersey and council members. Corrine Wilson with the Center on Policy Initiatives and with the Community Budget Alliance. And as a data geek, I loved all of this. This was great. I would use these tools definitely in my work, and but as folks were saying, let's really think about the different levels of experience. These tools will address a lot of the issues at the city, whether we're talking about coordination, communication. However, we really still need strong community outreach and education and organizing. The folks that really need infrastructure investments in their communities, that we're talking about the low income or immigrant communities, in the most challenged neighborhoods, they don't have internet access. They really are the digital divide that we talk about. Speaking with folks from San Diego Organizing Project and MAC and Mid-City Canon, the groups that are at the CBA, I said, so how do your folks access the internet? And they're like, they don't really. A lot of them are Cricket subscribers, so they have the kind of, you buy a little bit of minutes on your phone, and that's when those minutes run out, you wait until your next paycheck and maybe you can get some more minutes. And we know that the libraries are challenged to provide internet access for our residents. So it's not just accessing the internet, it's knowing how to use a computer or knowing how to use this stuff. But beyond that, it's understanding that what you're doing in your neighborhood, how you experience your neighborhood, how does that connect back with the city? You know, or if you're walking around your neighborhood and you're pressing the button to cross a street light or to cross at a street light and it runs out before you get across, how do you know who to talk to about that? Or you don't have a curb cut and you're walking with your stroller. What we do, or what our groups that are at the CBA do, is they take that everyday experience that people come to them and say, you know, I'm having trouble in my neighborhood, and they say, you know, these are the people, this is the way that you can get that addressed. So there is still that need to have an outreach program, whether it's through, you know, ideally it's a bit city and a bit, you know, community organizing groups, that then helps make this a complete project, because we would love to be able to use this stuff, but it's to grow a bigger understanding. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I appreciate those comments. Do we have any? Yes, we do. Ms. Emerald, questions?
Well, just dovetailing off of these comments from Corinne, I know before Council President Tony Young retired from the council to go take over the American Red Cross chapter here, he began an initiative reaching out to schools and other public entities to share wireless in some of our needier neighborhoods. And I think that as part of infrastructure, we need to continue that and pursue it, so we do expand that internet reach and the access to this information. Not that we should slow down this process because we're behind the curve, but as we go, perhaps we can be thinking in those terms of how do we work with the school districts so that, for example, people who live in the little neighborhoods right around the schools would be able to access their wireless. Our libraries, how do we make sure that perhaps, or accommodate so that neighborhoods around our libraries can access wireless? And we've got organizations like Futures Foundation, for example, that refurb computers that are donated by all kinds of big entities, whether public entities or private businesses. And then they donate those computers out to the system. But if we can help accommodate that wireless piece, especially in our lower income neighborhoods, I think that would be very helpful going forward. Yeah. Thank you for these. I understand about half of it. I'm not. I know that, you know, Sherry's saying, "Oh, this is old news," but it all makes absolute sense that we tie this information in. I would be curious to hear from Mr. Heinrichs or Mr. Nagelforth on these presentations. What's your take on this? How closely are you working with it? Are you ready to just roll with it? Especially if you get free beer.
I think we were supposed to provide the free beer. I think that's what I picked up on. I think the first reaction is that I try to hide the fact that I'm a nerd, but I'm an engineer and I kind of think this is cool, and that you heard a lot of topics. And so that's why it's hard to understand, because there's just different things thrown out there.
Oh, thank you. Very generous there. I appreciate it.
I'm doing it for my benefit, too. One is for Ari's presentation, looking at tools and methodologies, and that data can come directly from the entity making the impact on the asset, whether that's the contractor that we have out there working, or whether that's the condition assessment consulting firm we hired. Contractors building the new asset, they're collecting data. The condition assessment is the old asset. We send the consultant. Can they get data on in there, or the general public, or city staff? We have crews. We got people that go out there and maintain facilities every single day. Is there a way that they can get their data quicker, faster in place in that? Absolutely very interested in that, because it seems like the more information we post, the greater the expectation that gets more timely, and the pressure is there. The other topics that have been raised in that, Carl Nettleton, and that talks about, by the way, Carl, Small World did not go away. It's IMCAT. We built off of that. So CityWorks didn't go away. We built off of that, became IMCAT. So we didn't throw that away. We actually, that's the back layer in that. But that GIS application, all of this has to be done in GIS. So much of our work that we do in that, it's about trying not to run into each other. whether that is spatially, that we don't have contractor A in the same spot as contractor B, or time. We don't have contractor A in the same time as contractor B. And so he's absolutely right in terms of doing GIS and that. As it relates to the, Tony and I are talking in the background, as it relates to the CIP website. The CIP website initially a year ago today didn't exist. It existed in May. And then when it was initially put together, it was about just telling the public, it was about telling contractors, consultants, council, and the public about the projects that were already approved in the CIP budget that we were working on. Now we're all talking about a very important topic, that being asset management, which then includes probably 95% of the assets now that we're not working on. So we've added now and included Joe LaCava and CPC and other community groups and the organizations to participate in recommending projects for the CIP budget. Well, they do need access to the same information we have. So that means we got to go back and look at that CIP website and try and figure out how do we manage this. It might actually turn into a different website where CIP is about projects and then maybe an infrastructure management website. We've got to sit down. So where does this lead? I think I'm collecting business cards from these gentlemen, and I think we're going to sit down and sort of brainstorm where we can go with this and that.
And then think about all the money we could save if we just compensate them in beer. A question too, is it Jeff? Is that your name? I think that you were a good person to bring it home, and in the sense that there are a lot of people out there like me who recognize that this is important stuff, but we look at it and our eyes go crossed. I think part of it is getting people to use it, and a way to get people to use it is to make it kind of, not dumb it down, but to make it simple. Yeah. I come from an industry where you don't use words that have more than 2 syllables because the average television viewer is an 8th grade education or something, and not to denigrate anybody, but the point is that there are so many distractions out there. There are so many people with various ranges of education or ability to comprehend on this level, and the easier we make it in terms of readability, language that everybody can understand, the more people are going to access it and not be afraid of it. And that's half of it, right? If you bring them through the front door, any business person will tell us, right, that you get them in and then you can sell them probably. And that's where we want to go ultimately. This isn't just about us all having fun with GIS. It's about the community really buying into it, using it, so that they're better informed and it provides a service. So this is all terrific, and I hope that we do, when we funnel it all down, make it something that's very usable, very understandable, and the public thinks, oh, let's go there first instead of picking up the phone and leaving a message in the Public Works Department necessarily. Although we're all here to answer questions, I think that this would be a terrific tool for the public. And so I hope that all this sharing will lead to something, and sooner than later, because when we were talking about the SAP system, we don't want to all be rolled out from the home to cut the ribbon on a final SAP system. And on this, the sooner the better, because GIS is where it's at, and we need to really jump in and go full tilt with it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Emerald. Ms. Leitner.
I want to thank you all for the presentation. It's very, very fascinating. I think the idea of collecting data while you're actually out on the ground doing projects is great, although I note that we have a whole lot of infrastructure that needs to be placed pretty quickly. And so that's where I think the volunteer or the pilot project would be helpful as well, and then use the as a regular part of contracts to keep that updated and current. But empowering the people to actually tell us where the lights are out, when they're out, is great, because most folks aren't out during the nighttime to see. Most city workers are not out at night to see when the lights are out. So to ID those, for one simple example, is amazing. I did like that GIS map over there at Pennant.
Thank you, Ms. Leitner. Well, good. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for these presentations. They're very helpful. I'm looking forward to, as I believe my colleagues are, seeing how you guys are able to work with our department staff as well as the mayor's office and potentially the city attorney as well on the mechanics of how this will go forward. But I think it's very exciting, and I really applaud the work you're doing, and thank you for your presentations here today. Great. Well, I think that's going to do it for today's meeting. Thank everybody for your attention. For the people watching at home, thank you for participating online. And our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on April 29th at 9 a.m. And that'll be the next time we see you guys. So thank you, everybody, for your attention, and we are adjourned.